was country when country wasn't cool. Yeah, I was country when country wasn't cool.
We all know Barbara Mandrell, country music superstar, 25 top 10 hits, 6 number 1 hits. Host of the Barbara Mandrell Show on NBC. Winner of the CMA's Female Vocalist of the Year twice. The first entertainer ever to win the CMA Entertainer of the Year award twice. Member of the Grand Ole Opry, member of the Country Music Hall of Fame, American icon during the late 70s and 80s. But did you know that Barbara quit the music business at the age of 18? And if it hadn't been for her husband being shipped overseas by the Navy and Barbara's first visit to the Grand Ole Opry while he was gone, we may have never heard the name Barbara Mandrell. Well, that's all true, and here's the story. You see, Barbara Mandrell was very talented, very young. In her biography, she calls herself a child prodigy. Now, I don't think she uses this term arrogantly. I think she just uses it honestly. From the very first time she laid hands on a musical instrument, which in her case was the accordion at the age of 5, music just came naturally to her. It's like her hands knew exactly what to do and just flowed over the instrument. Around the age of 10, Barbara's dad, Irby, who she was always very close to, got a job selling amplifiers to musicians and bands, going from convention show to convention show, drumming up business. Now, Irby needed to get people's attention to stop by his booth, and he needed a way to show off his amplifiers. And the way he did both of these was by letting little Barbara Mandrell play the steel guitar. Musicians, many very experienced and some even famous, stopped by Irby's booth, saw Barbara playing, and were thoroughly impressed. It wasn't long before Barbara was invited to play shows herself. Joe Mathis, known as the King of the Strings, was a flashy country guitar player. He heard Barbara at one of the conventions and invited her to play on his show in Las Vegas, which Barbara was delighted to do. She was cast as the Sweetheart of Steel, and she delighted the crowds with her musical skills and her bubbly personality. She was paid $250 for her first show. Barbara was only 11 years old. Now, at the age of 12, Barbara was hanging out with some mighty fine company. Having seen Barbara performing, she was invited to tour with Johnny Cash, June Carter, Patsy Cline, and George Jones. She remembers both Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline fondly. Johnny Cash was the headliner of the package show, so he was in charge of Barbara. Whenever they would fly somewhere, Barbara, who was still young and mesmerized by flying, would bug Johnny Cash to death, saying, "Mr. Cash, look at those little cars. Mr. Cash, do you see those clouds?" Of course, Johnny handled Barbara with great patience, and it wasn't until Johnny was a guest many years later on Barbara's own show that he finally told her that it was everything he could do not to tell little Barbara Mandrell to be quiet so he could get some sleep. Now, while on the road during these shows, Barbara was given a room of her own. Patsy Cline didn't like the idea of Barbara staying in a room by herself, so she always told Barbara to come sleep in her bed. It's on those nights that Barbara, separated from her own mom and sisters, would comb Patsy Cline's hair as the two talked. Little did they know that Patsy Cline would be killed in a plane crash just a few short years later. Now, these young years were great years for Barbara. Sharing the stage with country music legends is something most of us can only dream about. But Barbara was doing it as a young teenager. Barbara finished the Johnny Cash tour and then started playing on the Town Hall Party Show a country music show in Los Angeles. But that show was canceled in 1961 when Barbara was 13. Wanting to give Barbara an outlet to continue to perform, Barbara's dad, Irby, started a band called the Mandrell Family Band when Barbara was 14. Mom and Dad Mandrell played in the family band with Barbara, and Barbara's two sisters, Louise and Earlene, would eventually join. Of course, the three sisters would star in the Barbara Mandrell Show on NBC decades later, but they first performed together in their own family band. Now, the Mandrell family traveled Southern California every weekend, playing shows mainly at military bases since the girls were too young to play at the nightclubs, and they grew a decent following. Life was good for Barbara, and the Mandrell family was having fun traveling and playing together. But make no mistake, the Mandrell family band was a family band run by Barbara's dad, Irby. Yes, Barbara was the star of the show, but the band was a family band, mainly touring for fun. While they took the job seriously and worked hard, no one in the Mandrell family had any intention of turning music into a full-time career. And certainly, Barbara had no intentions of being an entertainer as an adult. She had a different life in mind. Barbara's dad hired a drummer for the family band. His name was Ken Dudney. Now, Ken was 21 years old when he was hired, and Barbara was 14. Playfulness and flirting ensued, and it wasn't long before Ken and Barbara were secretly dating. Of course, this presented all kinds of problems, especially when Ken decided to join the Navy as a pilot, and Barbara's parents found out about their romance. Barbara's dad told Ken that if he caught him around Barbara before she turned 18, he would call his commanding officer at the Navy and let him know about the situation. Needless to say, that solved that problem. With Ken out of Barbara's life, Barbara put even more time into her music. At the age of 17, she made her first recording called Queen for a Day on an independent label. The one and only Glenn Campbell played guitar on that record. Now, with close ties to the military, the Mandrell family band traveled to Asia to play for the troops who were fighting in the Vietnam War. When they returned home from their tour, Barbara found that Queen for a Day had seen modest success in pockets of the country. She traveled to do an interview on a TV show in Chicago, and who else would be on that same show that day except Merle Haggard. Now, by this time, Ken was back from the Navy on leave, and right before Barbara turned 18, Ken requested permission to start seeing Barbara again. Barbara's parents gave them permission, and before long, 25-year-old Ken proposed to Barbara, and Barbara accepted. Ken Dudney and Barbara Mandrell were married just a few days before Barbara graduated from high school. Now, after Barbara married, the couple relocated to Washington State, where Ken was stationed, and Barbara settled into life as a Navy officer's wife. While she was younger than most of the other officers' wives, she enjoyed her life in the Navy. Barbara had no intention of doing anything else. She set music aside and was completely committed to Ken and her life at home. Barbara was happy to be Mrs. Barbara Mandrell Dudney. But life at home was upended when Ken was sent overseas for almost a year. Not wanting to stay by herself in Washington, she went to stay with her family who had moved to Tennessee, where Irby had grown up. Now keep in mind, although Barbara grew up listening to country and played country music in the family band, she had grown up on the West Coast in California and spent her whole life there. Barbara had never been to Tennessee, had never been to Nashville, and had never been to the Grand Ole Opry. So she jumped at the chance when her dad suggested they go to the Ryman Auditorium to see the Grand Ole Opry for the first time. As Barbara and her dad sat in the balcony before the show, Barbara got to witness firsthand the friendliness and ease of country singers. She got to see the famous backdrops and hear the familiar commercials she had heard on the radio for so long. She got to see the world-famous WSM microphone. She got to see the other performers milling around on the side of the stage, whispering in hushed and friendly tones as they talked to each other. Country music stars to her really did seem like the perfect family. Before the Opry began that night, Barbara and her dad watched them tape the Porter Wagoner Show. Of course, if you got to see Porter, you also got to see the beautiful and talented country girl from East Tennessee, Dolly Parton. Now this was even before many of Dolly's most famous hits, such as Coat of Many Colors and Jolene. And as Barbara watched Dolly on the stage at the Ryman, Barbara was mesmerized. The whole time she listened, she couldn't fight this feeling that she wanted to start performing again. Of course she liked being a Navy officer's wife, and perhaps could have spent her entire life that way. But watching Dolly perform on the Ryman stage, it just seemed like something maybe she could do. Completely overwhelmed with this feeling and caught up in the moment, she leaned over to her dad and whispered, "Daddy, I can do that. I want to get back into music if you'll manage me." As quickly as Barbara blurted out those words, her dad whispered back, "I'll sell the house and we'll go for it." And just like that, Barbara Mandrell was back in the music business. Now, how did Ken feel about Barbara getting back into the music business? How would this affect his career? How about Barbara's sisters, who would have to follow Barbara around the country as she pursued her music dream? And how exactly did Barbara Mandrell get her start in Nashville? Well, that's a story for another day.